All right, it's great to have you here. So, welcome and thanks for being here, Kevin.
Thanks for inviting me.
Absolutely. So, you are the latest in a long line of storied Microsoft CTOs,
Huh.
dating back to Nathan Myhrvold starting Microsoft Research and Ray Ozzie launching Microsoft Azure, which
Yep.
is obviously very on point today. So, I'm going to hit you with a hardball right here off the top,
Awesome.
Kevin. Big picture, what technological challenges, what milestones do you think we'll be citing about your tenure as CTO in
Lord.
the decades from now when it ends?
Well, so I don't know that like anybody will be able to rightfully give me credit for anything because now more than ever, the things that we are trying to accomplish in technology are so complex that it requires like huge numbers of very talented people to pull anything interesting together. There are a bunch of things that are moment in time like really important right now where you sort of have a convergence of a bunch of technological trends. So, we have the end of Moore's law rapidly approaching, and for all intents and purposes, like one of the things we get confused about is the important thing that's already gone is Dennard scaling, which says that you can sort of put more transistors onto a chip and actually power them without burning your dies up. So we're already at the point where the density improvements we get in silicon aren't as usable as they were when Dennard scaling was actually working. And so that's coming at the same time that we have these AI workloads that like even what's happened over the past 6 to 9 months has just been mind-boggling. Like we're in this mode where the quality of the results that you can compute with the most ambitious flavors of these machine learning systems, whether it's simulation-based reinforcement learning or pure unsupervised learning, is entirely a proportion of how much compute you can throw at them. So like compute's not getting cheaper, and like you have this new workload that is hungry for compute in ways that nothing ever has been before. So like that is a really interesting set of factors where, it has implications for how we build next generation compute and networks and software stacks. Like what you're going to be able to do with all of this AI is just mind blowing, like in ways I think that are hard to predict for a bunch of folks. And then you also have this other like really interesting thing where IoT and sensing are accelerating because actually Moore's law is still working there. So most of these low cost microcontrollers and microprocessors are still on older process technologies. So like we've got another couple or 3 doublings of price performance coming, and so like more and more of the world is going to get instrumented, and you're going to be able to sort of take this sort of data enriched AI powered feedback loops that have built the consumer internet, for instance, and like that's going to migrate into like all sorts of things like industrial controls and home automation and
So that confluence of the cloud and artificial intelligence and data is so fascinating. We're going to dive into that, but I want to start by actually throwing a question to both you and the audience. We have another poll question. A lot of the focus in the early days of the cloud was on the infrastructure, on the plumbing, and we are getting into these more exciting applications now.
Yep.
So our question for you, Kevin, and for the audience is, which high-level cloud technologies are on your radar for the next 2 to 3 years? If you could pick 1, 2, 3, what would be top of mind for you and then by extension for the audience?
The thing that I spend most of my time on is machine learning and the infrastructure to support it at large scale. Is like you start getting models where the training, like an average sort of training run for like a contemporary high ambition model right now is measured in petaflop days worth of compute. And there are things that people are doing that are hundreds or thousands of petaflop days already. And so like I spend a lot of time thinking about how we're going to build the infrastructure to support that. And then I think, like I already said, like IoT, I think is very exciting. Serverless is like, if I did 1, 2, 3, it'd be AI, IoT, serverless.
Yeah, do they still stack rank at Microsoft? Because you could stack rank this list.
Well, I stack rank my time,
Yes.
and that's not necessarily the same stack rank
Yes.
that the rest of the company would have.
Yeah, for the record, I think they've ended that. But what about quantum? I threw that on there, and it was very controversial in the GeekWire office when I did put it on there in the next 2 to 3 years. Is that's completely ridiculous, right? For 2 to 3 years out to be thinking about quantum on the roadmap of folks here in the audience? Tell me I'm wrong, if I am.
Well, look, I think everyone in the audience should be a little bit curious about quantum. And it's one of those things where early curiosity will pay dividends, because at some point we believe that we've got all of the basic science problems solved for building robust topological qubits. Which is like our particular flavor, and there are a number of different ways that folks are pursuing, like building physical qubits. The remaining problems that we or challenges that we think we have are mostly engineering things, and like we've got plans in place for all of those. So in my mind, it's a question of when, not if.
If you were a startup or an investor or an entrepreneur in the room, would you be seriously thinking about quantum computing as part of your roadmap, or would it just be more of that?
Yeah, look,
Peripheral.
if you're like a Series A, Series B startup, I would not advise people to like be building a business plan where like at some point in the next 2 to 3 years, a quantum computer that is functional and like ubiquitously available is going to materialize. Now, there are startups who are working on quantum computing, and like I think a bunch of those are like very interesting. Like they're building the infrastructure itself, but I don't think we're at the stage right now where we're ready for business models to be built on top of infrastructure, which is still sort of in development.
Yeah. Let's actually look at the results of those polls, of the poll, question number 2, if we can pull that up, to see what folks in the audience are saying. Wow. So, Kevin, they're right on line with what you're saying.
Maybe
well, no, I don't know if we're at a representative
Maybe I
sample
bias
yet.
everybody.
Here we go. It's quite possible. It's quite possible. All right, folks are still adding to it. Keep adding to that, and we'll revisit later on. So I asked that question about quantum. In a practical way, what types of business-changing, transformative applications are you actually seeing in the AI and ML realm among the folks that are working on Microsoft's platform?
Yeah, the thing that's really changed across the entire AI community over the past 6 months is there have been a couple of astounding breakthroughs in unsupervised learning for natural language processing, natural language understanding, and like what is happening is like we have figured out a new way to build models that build some sort of conceptual notion of like what natural language looks like, and from that you can build a bunch of like very specific applications that are higher performing, and like it's sort of much lower cost to adapt the general model to like a use case. And like the use cases are all over the place, from question answering to document summarization to search to like literally there are like a dozen or more things that folks are looking at right now. And so we're just starting to see these things sort of trickle out into the product portfolio. And I think the interesting thing about about AI is, and like this is a little bit of a crass metaphor, but the way that I think about it is AI is not a product. It is technology that you use to build products. And so like you wouldn't say that, oh, I've got a better linked list implementation and like that's a product. Like we have a different and better way now to build the features of a whole bunch of products. And so the way it will show up is not in some sort of big bang thing. It's like, oh, here we've got an artificial like human chatbot thingy. It's going to be that a bunch of the features of a whole lot of products are going to get better in material ways. And some of it is, you're just not going to be aware what's going on. Like content moderation on the Xbox platform, for instance, has got a whole bunch of this tech in it, and it's being used to try to prevent bullying and bad behavior on the platform and to protect kids, for instance. And it's just much easier to scale those sorts of systems when they're powered by AI and sort of enhanced by human beings than like there's just no number of humans you could hire to go moderate a platform that's got tens of millions of users on it.
So we actually have an example of where Microsoft has been expanding its capabilities in this area through acquisitions, including one that I know you were involved with, and that was the acquisition of Lobe. And if we could look at that next slide, Andrew, I've got that queued up. So
Yeah.
This is an example of one thing that the Microsoft platform has expanded into through this acquisition. What's happening here?
Well, the idea, again, AI is a technology that we believe everybody should be using to help make their products better. And so it's a platform that we're trying to build, and like the power of a platform is not, I mean, like Bill Gates said this a gazillion years ago. Like the true value of a platform is, or the true measure of its success is that most of the economic value of things built on top of the platform accrues to folks that aren't the platform builder. And so the idea with Lobe is like we want to be able to build a set of tools that let you build machine learning systems when you're not an AI expert, and like moreover, where you may not even know how to program. And like that's one of the really exciting things about some of these new machine learning technologies. So like what Lobe does is like this particular use case is just trying to like let someone, that's Mike Mattis there on the screen, so he's a designer. One of the founders of the company is like, here's a little quick 2-minute thing that lets you build a gesture recognizer. But the cool thing, and like I may have mentioned this to you before, like the motivation that Mike and his co-founders have for the company is like Mike is a designer, so like he can do some JavaScript hacking and like build some front ends, but like he's not a like a engineer with 10,000 hours of like hardcore programming experience. And so he like it's a beautiful example. So he lives in this off the grid house in Marin County. Like he has a solar powered like everything, including his well pump. And so like he has to pump water out of the well into a holding tank so that when the sun goes down, he can like still have water. And he's like, oh, I want to build a web app that shows me what the water level is in this tank. Like, and like many of you in the room are engineers. Like, if I were to solve this problem, I'd go put a bunch of sensors in the tank. I'd like hook a Raspberry Pi or an Arduino or something up to the side of the thing, connect it to the cloud, build a model of like the sensor outputs to water levels. I'd write a whole bunch of code and like I'd solve the problem. Like that's not a set of things that are in Mike's toolkit. And so what he did is he put a float in the tank attached to a rope and a pulley over the side of the tank, and there was a weight like hanging on the other end of the rope that moved up and down on the side of the tank based on the position of the float, which is sort of correlated with how much water's in there. He put a webcam on there and used Lobe to like record the position of the water in a few places and pressed a button, and Lobe built a machine learned model of the position in the webcam images of that weight on the side of the tank to the water level, and like published a sort of a JSON cloud API, and like he wrote his web app, which is beautiful because he's one of the best designers in the world, and like that whole way of solving a problem enabled by machine learning is far more intuitive for a whole class of people who haven't had this engineering mindset beat into them. And like to me, that's really, really exciting, sort of expanding the size or the number of people in the world who can create things with advanced technology is like nothing but goodness.
It's interesting because that example perfectly illustrates how much the real world plays into these emerging forms of technology.
Yeah.
It's not just software, it's not just bits and bytes, it's actual physical objects. And
Yeah.
this actually plays directly into deeply held philosophy and approach of yours. I understand that you're currently building out your own machine lab, basically, your own machine shop.
Yeah.
Tell us about that a little bit, and explain your overall thoughts on the integration of hardware and software and the importance of that in this new era.
Yeah, I mean, I'm I'm sort of lucky enough where I get to build my dream prototyping lab, and like I sort of get it honest. My granddad was a tinkerer. Like he started off his like life as a like he was a boiler room mechanic in the Navy in World War II, and then like came home and was a farmer until he had a pretty bad farming accident, and then he became a appliance repair person. Like he had this little shop in rural Central Virginia that he ran, but like on the side, like he was always inventing these Rube Goldberg machines, and so like he like always made things with his hands, and the other side of my family were all in construction, so there was always someone tinkering with something in my house. And now, like I get to have a lab where I can sort of tinker with things, and my machines are like 3D printers and sort of CNC machines. And so, I think this is the interface between software and the physical world is extremely interesting, and like one of the things that that machine learning is going to allow us to do in ways that like we just haven't been able to do before is that interface is messy. Like the real world is not governed by rules that are as logical and sort of straightforward as the rules that we have for software systems, and like that's not to having spent my entire life building software systems and arguing with the hardware guys that the software is easy when I think the hardware is the hard part. Like it's not to diminish like how complex software actually is. But like machine learning, I think gives us a bunch of powerful new tools and techniques to deal with that like complicated, messy interface where like we've got hundreds and hundreds or like millennia worth of effort to like try to characterize the behavior of the physical world with like analytic models and like fancy mathematics and whatnot, which again is like a beautiful way to try to understand the world, but like not necessarily the most approachable thing. Like you can't expect like an average tinkerer to sit around and like understand like these nonlinear partial differential equations that like characterize like a physical system, whereas like you may be able to like give them a set of tools where like a machine learning system can give them enough control over that physical thing that they can do something interesting with it.
So when you look out 3, 4, 5 years, how important is that shared understanding of hardware and software for folks who are building companies and products?
Look, I think it's super interesting, and again, because you have some wind in the sails of Moore's Law, and you've got all of this opportunity for places where you can interface with the physical world. Like I think it's just where business opportunity is going to live, and it's the interesting thing. Like one of the reasons why I built this shop is like we're gonna be filming some maker videos, which are the things that I enjoy watching online. Because I think the software and the hardware is already good enough to be doing much more interesting things than people are doing. And like what I want to do is sort of show people like what's possible. Like I'm going to build like the first thing that we're going to shoot, and like it's probably going to post online later this year is the design and construction of a vacuum siphon coffee machine that's going to have a vision and speech interface. So like no buttons, like the user interface will be all AI.
So this is you, not Microsoft.
This is me, although we'll like publish it on Microsoft's.
Yeah. Not a Microsoft product
No.
yet.
This is like for the love of God, don't tell Satya I'm doing this.
That's great. So, as I mentioned earlier, you grew up in rural Virginia, and you've actually revisited farms there and here in Washington State as part of a book that I believe you're writing on artificial intelligence. If we could look at those pictures as well. So these pictures are from a farm in Carnation, Washington. It's implementing a Microsoft project called FarmBeats that uses drones and AI to monitor crops and yields. So when it comes to the future of AI and edge computing, what do cloud providers and tech companies need to do better to serve rural America, and what do you see happening there in the next 3 to 5 years that might have implications for folks here?
Yeah, I think there are. I mean, so like we do need to work much harder than we're doing right now, not just to build products that serve the needs of folks in rural and middle America, but that we all should be thinking about how we build platforms and infrastructure and invest and like spend our cycles helping to give folks in these parts of the country tools that they need to like for them to become entrepreneurs and to create opportunity inside of their own communities. And so like I think the good news is that the more advanced flavors of automation technology that we're seeing right now, I think disproportionately benefits these communities. Like agriculture is like a really good thing. It's really hard as a small local farmer to compete because agriculture has become a high tech business, and like as the barrier to entry to having access to these technologies gets lower, like then you can sort of run your local organic farm that creates jobs inside of its community and like has less environmental impact and actually delivers like a really great product for people to consume in those communities. Like that becomes a possible thing, and it's like super important, like especially as you sort of think decades ahead of like what challenges are facing us. Like if you look at climate change and like where the global population growth is mostly going to be coming in the last half of the 21st century, like things get super challenging, I think, and like you have to have new breakthroughs in agricultural productivity, or like we're going to have a hard time feeding people.
So this is also an example of edge computing
Yep.
in some ways where the processing is taking place away from the cloud in part because of connectivity
Yep.
issues. One interesting thing that we have on the horizon is 5G. Microsoft has made a big bet on the intelligent edge. How do you see those two trends coming together? Will there be a lower need for edge computing, or how does that shake out?
Look, I think what 5G does is it makes the edge platforms even more interesting. So you get lower latency and like higher throughputs. You still will have to have different solutions for rural areas because like the 5G technologies require higher densities of towers than we even have right now with 4G. But like there are solutions to that, like we have this like wireless broadband initiative that we're working on that uses unused TV white space to like get connectivity out to these farms. But like 5G, I think is actually it presents this opportunity for us to like really sort of think about the architecture of these edge applications in different ways. Like for instance, one of the things that we see already emerging is with these computer vision models, you may on a like on a constrained compute edge device, you'll be able to run one level of inference. So like you can do like sort of generic event detection, for instance, like on the edge, and then refer like those interesting events back up to the cloud to do like a heavyweight inference to like actually classify an object or whatnot. And like 5G just lets you sort of draw those lines differently, and like you can build much more interesting applications.
I've got to go back a little bit in your history. You were at AdMob before its acquisition by Google.
Yes.
And obviously one of the main concerns that people cited in the survey that we showed at the beginning was security and privacy.
Yeah.
How has your thinking on privacy data evolved as you've gone from AdMob to Google to LinkedIn to Microsoft? And where do you see this going from here?
Well, I think like I always I was lucky enough to be an engineer, and I think many engineers are like very like they're sort of aware of like what's going on inside of all of these systems, and like have very strong opinions about privacy and security in the first place. So like I've always thought that it's extraordinarily important. And at AdMob, and like I was an early Google employee, like we took all of these things like deadly seriously, just in terms of access controls and whatnot. But like if anything, like it gets more and more important every day, because the thing to forget, like AdMob was 2007, 2010, like 9 years later after the acquisition, the world of data that is residing in clouds is like many orders of magnitude larger, and like presents this like very interesting challenge for folks. Like the digital world's become more complex. Like what footprint you're leaving as you sort of use digital services is like grown much larger as like we spend more time online. And so like I think the onus is on all of technology companies, large and small, that are handling people's data. Like you've got some regulatory things that you now have to comply with, like GDPR. Like I think more of those regulations are coming, and I think that's a good thing for consumers. And I think we actually, like, we as an industry need to go above and beyond, like, because we sort of have early line of sight on like what the trends are with sort of privacy, and and security as well.
So you have a fascinating role. You effectively were able to come in and help Satya Nadella by stitching together a lot of the tech strategies across the company. So you have this broad vision across the company, you and your team, and you essentially are able to see what's happening. What would be your insight for this crowd, for this audience of business leaders, technologists, and developers, something that you see in your day-to-day work that not everybody out there might see, that they might be able to apply in their apps and businesses?
Yeah, I mean, I think we've talked about a bunch of it already. So, like some of this stuff that I've talked about in terms of the unsupervised learning and the reinforcement learning stuff probably sounds like far off in the distance, and like some of this stuff, like about IoT probably sounds like it's far off in the distance. Like the insight that I have is like, don't think it's far off in the distance. Like you should, like especially on the machine learning front, like that needs to be a part of every company and every developer's toolkit. Like even when it doesn't seem right now, like at this very moment in time, that it's going to be relevant, like progress is happening so quickly that if you wait too long, you're going to like be in this position where you're sort of scrambling to catch up. And so, the good news is the infrastructure is getting better, like just as fast as, I mean, sort of logically, like the infrastructure is what's sort of enabling a bunch of the progress. So, like the infrastructure is there, and like you have a bunch of market forces that are trying to like sort of push down and lower barriers to entry and make it as accessible as possible. But there's still like a bunch of learning, like building a machine learning application is very different from like how you would build like a web app, for instance. And there's this sort of maturity process, like we've even seen it inside of Microsoft, where you've got like this population of folks who are like right on the frontier of what's happening in AI. Like they're publishing the papers, like they're going tit for tat with like the best people in the field. Like, oh, like our benchmarks now the number one on this AI competition. That's a small group of folks, and then you've got like a group of folks who are like, okay, like I'm doing something with machine learning, like I'm training models, like I'm doing my A/B testing, like I've got my data hygiene in the right place, like I've got stuff in production, and then you've got a bunch of folks who are not doing machine learning, and like we're just sort of seeing like those spheres like rapidly increase in size, and it's really interesting. Even for the folks who are at Microsoft, like I've been doing this job for 2.5 years now. When I started, like there were a bunch of people who were, a bunch of our developers and product managers and sort of even the data scientists who were doing machine learning, and like it was just not progressing as fast to catch up with what's on the frontier as it should have been. And so like we had to come in and inject a bunch of urgency into things, and so like if you don't have that drive for urgency to sort of try to get closer to the frontier, like you should probably try to find it.
Very good. Good takeaway. Just if machine learning and AI are not on your roadmap, be thinking about how to integrate them into your business and app.
Yeah, at the very least, just from an awareness perspective, so you'll be ready at the right time for your company.
Yeah. Kevin, I could talk to you for hours. Unfortunately, our time has come to an end. I want to thank you for being here. But before we move on, I understand Microsoft actually has some news to announce.
We do. So we're going to bring my colleague Gretchen O'Hara to the stage. Gretchen is a founding member of the Women in Cloud community, and she's got something super fun and really interesting to announce. So welcome, Gretchen.
Welcome, Gretchen, and thank you, Kevin, very much.
I
welcome.
could sit and listen all day to Kevin as well.
Yeah.
Hi,
Welcome, Gretchen.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Really happy to be here. I am really excited to announce a couple things this morning from Microsoft. Women in Cloud. Women in Cloud is a social enterprise. It is a community-led initiative focused specifically on women-based entrepreneurs to really help enable them to grow their business in the cloud. And specifically around cloud, you heard about cloud and AI. Women in Cloud really is focused on the challenge that we have, which is how do we actually build more diversity in the way that we're building our cloud solutions, and really helping get our women entrepreneurs access to that technology, as well as access to a book of business and opportunity for economic growth. And so I'm excited today. We started last year. It's been an 18-month journey with the partnership of Microsoft. We had our first cohort of Women Accelerator. And out of that accelerator, we generated over 30 million in new business just from the connection of technology access and business connectivity. And so from there, we're now on our second cohort here in Seattle. We loved hearing about Seattle. But what I'm excited to announce actually is in partnership with Microsoft and IdeaGen, who is a cross-sector collaboration platform to help accelerate women in cloud. We are going global today. We are taking these accelerators for Women in Cloud accelerators, both here in Seattle, second class, launched yesterday, New York, as well as Chicago, and now going into 8 additional countries to really build out over 1,500 women-based entrepreneurs with a book of business to ultimately help us drive sustainable economic growth across the globe. So with that, I'm really excited to share the news. It's a really incredible opportunity, not just for the women entrepreneurs, but for all of us in the industry that are really focused on building out this economic opportunity on the cloud.
That's great. So that's great. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah.
I'm excited. We're excited. We're excited.
Congratulations, Gretchen. So we actually have the news posting soon on GeekWire. Nat Levy's. I know I see him typing furiously over there. So where does this go from here in terms of the overall volume? Obviously, you're going global, but does that mean an exponential increase in the number of businesses that you're going to be able to?
Exponential. I mean, we're actually see a $1 billion cloud business opportunity incrementally from this global expansion. We're very purposeful in what we're doing, but we're actually not stopping there. I encourage all of you to focus and take a look at what's going to be announced through the partnership today and where and how you can get involved. It's just a beginning. I think we have an incredible opportunity for growth past that.
Great. Gretchen, thank you very much.
So much.
Congratulations. All right.
Thank you all. Enjoy the
Thanks.
conference.
And a big thanks to Kevin Scott as well.